Previously, I've shown how Elliot crater is a cryovolcano. This active cryovolcano I'm calling bread slice is a cryovolcano. How this dormant volcano I've identified or called Kilauea, with Pahoehoe coming out the flanking side of this dormant volcano. I also identified the five sisters, which is this cryovolcano, this one, this one, this one, and 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe there's 4 or 5, but there are cryovolcanoes all over the place in this pressurized area here on Pluto. There's visual evidence to suggest that this is the pattern of flow that's occurring on Pluto. I can go into more detail in this later, but for now I'm just going to suggest that the material, the nitrogen fluid that's under the surface of the bedrock ice, is flowing in this direction under Viking Terra, creating this pressurized zone and flowing out through the eastern edge of the bedrock ice into Sputnik Planitia, creating this broiling area here. It's also flowing in a southerly direction, creating pressures down in this along the northwest area of Sputnik Planitia is a series of flow patterns that demonstrate how fluid is flowing from the northwest into Sputnik Planitia from underground. There is this like a river delta that has these swirly patterns as it's coming out, creating this whirlpool. This is an image of a whirlpool, and it's a complex pattern because there's subsurface fluids, subsurface probably nitrogen fluid, coming out from below the ice crust bedrock, and then there's a surface type fluid that's moving in a different direction. So there's currents, intermingling currents going in different directions, some from underground, some from the surface of Sputnik Planitia. This is causing ice blocks to separate, like this big chunk of ice here, which is a bedrock piece of land ice, water ice floating into Sputnik Planitia. But ice blocks like this here, and this one, and down here where this one is starting to break off in this delta where fluid is flowing from underneath, it's breaking off chunks, which are then turning into blocks like this. These blocks then are turning into a larger cluster of ice blocks along the western edge of Sputnik Planitia. But up here is that impact crater. This is where the whirlpool is. Off to the side more is where the delta is, where other ice blocks are breaking off. But then they are turning into these big clusters of icebergs. And this whole area has this look of discoloration as the fluid, the nitrogen fluid under the surface, has kind of thinned out the surface ices. And you can see these patterns as they come from the northwest, as that nitrogen fluid from the northwest underneath the surface is migrating into Sputnik Planitia, breaking off ice chunks like this big ice block here and others in this area, creating a delta and forming these other series of blocks, these smaller ones in this area and then larger ones out here. There's also wave-like patterns right in this area, which I'll show you now. If you look closely in this area here, you can see waves, ripples in the nitrogen ice. Here you have that one big block of ice, crustal ice or land ice, bedrock ice, breaking away from, being pulled by this nitrogen flow from underneath, which is dissolving these blocks of ice, weakening them, pulling them into Sputnik Planitia, and you can see these wave patterns as well as this delta of fluid flowing outward from this crack, which is also breaking off ice chunks, but there is this flow where ripples and streams of material are moving, breaking off features